Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kindasound Radio. You're here with me, Juliette Bryant, and this is Transformative Health. Today, I am really excited because back for, I think it's a third time now, I have probably my favourite superhero of the superfood world, David Avocado Wolfe. Thank you for being here.
Right on. Thank you. I did get up this morning. You can see I've got my Sasquatch shirt up to deal with a crisis on the road. So, it's been that kind of week. Actually, I'm three automobile breakdowns or troubles in just like 3 days.
Wow, that's a
So
lot.
that it's a message, right? There's a message in it, and what the message we got is, okay, don't go anywhere. I think that's
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of astrological stuff going on at the moment, and it's really full on for a lot of people. The changes, the shifting, and I think there's a lot of shadow stuff coming up to be cleansed and purified, so we can step into this new world. That's my feeling on it.
I agree. I agree. We're definitely going through a pimple pop of troubles. These are troubles that have been brewing for hundreds of years, decades, or even thousands of years. I mean, it's all of the above. So that's kind of happening all right now. And I think
Yeah.
we're going to go through the brunt of it the next 10 years. At least that's what my read is on it. And so that's going to be it's going to be a wild time. And in light of that, one of the reasons why I kept this vehicle over the last 22 years is because there's no computer chips in it. So it's
Yeah.
a legit old school vehicle, amazing drivetrain. And so it's something wrong with the fuel line right now currently. So I sent it to my best mechanic, and we're just going to stay home in the meantime.
Nice. I think one of the things I'm just getting ready today. Tomorrow I'm off to Yorkshire to do an event called Ascension, which is all about creating this new earth. And I really wanted to talk to you about this. I think it's such an important thing to be bringing in. What do we want to create? What reality do we want to be living in now and seeding for the future? And we've just built another couple of raised beds in the garden so that we can start growing more stuff. And I was feeling a little bit stressed before the call, packing up for this event, getting all the products ready, all that kind of stuff. You've done lots of events, so I'm sure you know that full on feeling before a big event. And my husband and I just remembered, one of the things that you say that always sticks in my head is just add into what you're doing. So we made a smoothie with red currants from last year, from mint from the garden, some ditanda, some mugwort from the garden, some of my all you need superfood blend that I make. And we just chucked all this stuff in. And I sat grounded myself with my feet off, my shoes off on the ground, breathing, getting some sun. I was like, okay, I feel so much better. And it's stuff that you've taught me, all of that information. So I really want us to get into today talking about, like, we are in this new earth, it's here now. What do we need to do? What do we need to look at for our bodies, for our minds, for our beings to really prepare and kind of bring that energy in?
That was so good. And I love the way you said Chuck. I mean, I all of a sudden I was thinking about all those times in driving around the UK and my friends like Chuck a Yui. And that, and we don't say that over here, but that I'm like, oh, it's been too long. I need to get back over there. I really do need to get back over there. Anyway, one of the things that I like to do, as you've mentioned, is stack my reality. So I'm always doing 10 things at once. So for example, I've got a metal computer, but these are shungite pads that separate me from my computer. So I'm not actually touching the metal at any time. And then I've got a grounding mat that's under my feet. And that's really what the New Earth is about. It's like taking the real technology that we have and actually utilizing it. And I guess I should grab that grounding pad for anybody who's not used to this technology. So when you're on a computer and this is connected to the ground wire of this house, it could also be connected just to a wire, just gets thrown out the window and gets punched into the ground, however you want to do it. But at any rate, when you have this, you're getting 10 times less, in a lot of cases, 100 times less electromagnetic fields hitting you from our devices, which aren't going away anytime soon. I know there's people out there who are like the doom and gloomers and like this is the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, but I think we're thousands of years away from the end of this epic, at least according to Rudolf Steiner. And so we're going through a rough one right now because it's the pimple pop of a lot of this evil that's been going on for decades or centuries or even thousands of years, whatever. But we'll get through it. And in order to get through it, we have to use what's in front of us. So what I like to do is I like to go through, hey, what do I have around me already that I'm not using? What foods do I have? Now, we've been for the last 3 days, as I've been dealing with these car troubles, what we've actually been doing is we've been out in the landscape in this region picking pine pollen.
Wow.
And for those of you who are listening right now, you may still be seasoned for pine pollen in your latitude. Now we're low latitude, we're in Texas near Houston. So as the pine pollen season begins, it starts to move north. And by the time it's like May, I'd say end of May, beginning of June, you're going to have pine pollen season in, say, Canada. That's kind of the timing of it. And so we're out there picking all the catkins and we're collecting all this pine pollen, and then we'll have jugs and jugs and jugs of powder of pine pollen, which is an androgen. So it's like pure testosterone from the environment. It's actually one of the best sources of minerals. It's one of the energy you get from it's incredible. And that's another thing that the New Earth is going to be doing is we need to get back to foraging a good chunk of our food wildly, because then all the forces are intact. Whenever we domesticate and something's behind a fence line, those forces are not intact. And these are the forces that Rudolf Steiner would call, for example, ether forces, formative forces. The ether forces are stronger in wild food. That's just the nature of the game, because wild food has to survive. It doesn't have a protector, right? So those ether forces, those formative forces, it's going to produce a poison, it's going to produce a needle, it's going to do something to keep it from being predated on, and therefore it's going to be stronger and it's going to make you stronger. So that was in my mind when you said that for the
When you
New
said
Earth.
about pine pollen, I mean, I think the Ringing Cedar books, the Anastasia books, are so amazing, and they had such an impact on me. In fact, I was doing some of the things from it before I read the books, like putting the seeds in my mouth and planting them. I've done that for all my life almost without knowing why. When I read the book, I was like, oh, that's why, to connect it. But she says in those books that when the new earth will be coming when the cedar trees ring, and it's like, one of the main things that's coming out, with this whole madness recently has been pine, pine needle tea and all of this. So pine is in so many people's awareness.
Good point. Yep, that's a very good point you're bringing up there. It has been in people's awareness, and like pine needle tea, we're doing a lot of pine needle tea just by default, because when you're out picking the catkins, which is the flower, the pine tree's flower, at this stage, you're, oftentimes pulling off pieces of the tree, and you get a lot of needles. So we are doing a lot of needle tea, which is one of the highest mineral rich teas, and probably one, in my opinion, one of the best teas in the world. The main reason recently we've been talking about is because of the shikimate being a neutralizer of spike protein, and shikimate is the precursor to all aromatic or smell compounds and all pigments in all of nature. And it's based on 3 amino acids, which is the phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan, those 3, of which 2 of those are essential. And phenylalanine and
It's good for
tryptophan.
brain development, isn't it, as well?
Yes. Yeah, it's very good for autistic children or developmental. It's very good for development in young children, and especially good for developmental disorders. But I mean, every young child should be having pine needle tea. It's that kind of a thing, because it's from our environment. I mean, you can almost never get rid of a pine tree. It's going to show up anywhere you are. You could be in the most remote part of Australia. You could be in the most, crazy little spot in Europe, anywhere in Africa, and there's just going to be a pine tree around. It's amazing. This family, I would say, of conifers. And so right now they're producing catkins. And what's interesting about that is when that pollen comes out, it not only is it good nutrition for you, but in this forest, for example, we're in a loblolly pine forest, which is the forest that dominates the entire South. When that pollen hits the ground, it's an androgen. So it stimulates all of the production of new tissue in nature, like, it stimulates springtime. And generally when the buds open on the trees, and they're doing that right now, and the flowers are coming out and the leaves are coming out, that's when the pine pollen's falling, because that's when the stimulation is needed.
So when it falls onto the ground, it stimulates the earth, does it?
Yes, that's right.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
We concentrate it and we pour it on our indoor plants and all of the plants we're growing, right? Because we want more of that, because it's one of the secrets of growth in the environment.
So if you didn't have any pine trees around you that you could collect, could you use pine pollen that you already had, in a powder form to feed to your plants?
Absolutely.
Amazing. So you can add it to, we've got nettles, comfrey, and menstrual blood as a fertilizer that we use on a regular basis. So we could add that to that.
You could add it to it. Yep. Great idea. Remember that, everything in nature. So it's interesting in this ecosystem, everything in nature is kind of speaking to us. So in this ecosystem, we have something really interesting happening. And that is, up high, we have the loblolly pine, which is 100-foot tall, or that would be like 30 meters, 35 meters tall when it's fully grown. right below it is the saw palmetto, and that's the dominant pattern through the whole south of north of this region of North America. And the saw palmetto berries are well known as being a prostate substance. So right there, you've got the prostate, and then you've got at the top of the tree, you got the testosterone. They're growing together. It's just amazing when you start putting these riddles of nature together. And that's why, again, for the new earth, we've got to like pay attention to our ecosystem. We've got to actually become, the way I like to describe it, herbally literate.
Yeah. I think that's such an important thing, and that's something that I do with my work all the time. I'm trying to support people in the UK and in Europe on understanding what plants are growing and how we can use them. And I was talking to people the other day about mallow and how important mallow is, because it's such a common thing that grows everywhere, and yet it's so amazing for the digestive system, for coughs, for things like that. What's one of your favorite wild plants?
That's one of them for sure. The Malvaceae and wild mallows are really high on my list. I like St. John's wort a lot. That's high on my list. I really like this pine phenomenon that's going on right now. Not only the pine needle, but also the pine pollen, because I grew up in a pine tree kind of environment. So that was my first foray into not only foraging but planting. The first trees I planted when I was a real little kid were pine trees. So this is near and dear to my heart. What else do I like? I really, I'm a big fan of wild berries, as you know, and I think that's one of the most important things to plant around you. If you don't have a lot of wild berries, get them in. Now, we were just up at a farm where we were picking lots of pollen, and below is all the wild berries now flowering. So they haven't come in yet. Obviously, it's too early, but they're coming, and they're going to come quick. So I'd say within 2 months, we're in full dewberry season in this region of Texas. And that's another really important survival food, because now we have the technology to freeze them. So you could collect easily let's just say in a few weeks, say even a month, you could easily collect enough berries to last you the entire year if you freeze them. Easy.
We've still got red currants. That's what's in this smoothie from last year's collection that we got out of the freezer. They had actually got buried. I thought we'd run out, and we found all of these red currants, which is so exciting because they're such an amazing source of vitamin C and other nutrients. It's, nature is incredible, isn't it? When you can tap into the gifts that she's giving us constantly.
It's just an awareness, right? To be able to go out there and be able to determine what's in your ecosystem. It's a riddle. So that's the way we say that, is that God speaks to us in riddles, but there's always a communication there. And so we're just reading into that. And the communication this morning was, hey, after all the prayers and stuff we did on a successful day this morning, it turned out that the car was like, needs to go and needs to stop for a while. And after all the driving we've been doing and all the moving around, we're getting the message to stay home. And so listening to those messages instead of pushing through is another new earth thing. Right? All this pushing is the old pattern of stuff. Instead of that, let's see what pulls us forward into the future.
And that's stepping, I think, isn't it, into the divine feminine. Is a lot of the work I've been doing is how can we birth this divine feminine, which is rising up, which is awakening. And the divine masculine, the masculine is push, 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 go, 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 and operating from business and life in that way. But the feminine is that flow and that connection so much more, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. It's really that. It's really about that connection, that flow. We call it the holy flow. Let's see, it was February 22nd, 2019, my neighbor, he left the earth. He was in his 70s, wonderful guy, but he gave me one great phrase, and it's the holy flow. And that was one of, and he lived on one of the most amazing springs. And it was really cool, by the way, when he left the earth, his wife called me and we went down there and we got to be with him in death. And that's so rare in our culture, right? That we can be there with the person when they're gone and with their body and before anybody shows up. And that's another thing for the new earth, is this separation of like, we're going to get rid of Granny, we're sending her to some kind of old folks home, or that whole thing we've got to bring it back into the house and bring all of that back in. And so that's another energy. We're not trying to push anything away out of our realities. Like, let's face death. Let's bring it back into the house. Let's stop trying to run away from all these things that we can't deal with because of our programming, when they're actually beautiful. It was really beautiful to be with him, and in that final day or two. He actually was 3 days before they came and got him.
Wow.
And so it was interesting just to be with his body, and his dog was there at his feet, and we're all in the room together and talking about his great life, and it was amazing. So that's another newer thing, is just we've got to really appreciate our elders and be there when they leave, and not be so separated from death.
I think, you know, if you think about it, with this whole craziness that's gone on in the world recently, if we didn't have such a fear of death, then none of this would have been able to take hold.
Good point. Wow, is that a good point?
It's like they couldn't have controlled us, but people are so scared of letting go, aren't they? I mean, ultimately, I think that's what it is, isn't it? It's that surrender and letting go and just trusting the flow of life in the universe, and that, you know, that the universe has your back. In some of the spiritual traditions, they say that when a body dies, it's 3 days before the soul completely leaves, so you shouldn't move the body for 3 days. So it's amazing with your neighbor that it was 3 days.
He got that. He got that. That was so cool. And I hope I get that, and hope we all get that opportunity. And it's also really cool that he got to go in his room. Right. And that's another thing too, is, you know, we're also all over the place. And I'm, of course, you know, guilty of that as much as anybody, but it's nice to be in one place. And then when you leave the earth, to leave in peace in your room, in your home. I mean, that's such a blessing. So I was over the years, last 3 years, I've been really, you know, thinking about him. He left really at the perfect time for him, you know, in his journey. And that's, you know, that's like, you know, prayers to the Most High. But, you know, what's coming up here, another thing that's, of course, a big piece of all of this is water sovereignty, energy sovereignty, and sustainability, and those kinds of things. The big another learning that's coming out of all that we're going through, and that will be important for the future, so that we have the tools necessary to build our own little solar kit for less than, you know, 50 pounds or something, you know, 50 quid, as you guys like to say. We can, that exists. It's easy to do that. And we have, for example, little windmill technology, or whatever, you know, whatever these things are that also that last. And that's another thing too, is having run 2 organic farms, and, you know, one of the things I found that really lasts is trees. And that's one of the reasons why we run a fruit tree planting foundation. I had them on the phone yesterday. We've got some great plantings coming up this year. We planted over 1 million trees. We've been planted, inspired, and empowered the planting of well over 1 million trees in our career. 20 years.
That's absolutely amazing. And you think, you know, if councils in local areas started to plant fruit trees or nut trees, or, you know, trees that actually give us nutrients, then how it would transform the world would be amazing. Because you see all these areas where they're just planting trees that don't have that value. And it's like, if you just swap those out, I know when I used to live in an area, they used to do guerrilla planting, and we'd go and plant fruit trees, you know, in random places. And that's such an important thing, because there are so many fruit trees. If you've got an apple tree, it will last for so long and give you so much food. I used to run free workshops for young mums on apples, because the council got me in and they said, you know, they don't know what to do with apples, and people aren't buying, they're not picking apples because they're scared of them. And to
Oh
me,
my God.
because they're not wrapped in plastic, and they don't come from a supermarket, and they don't all look the same. They think, I can't pick them off the ground because they're dirty, or they're contaminated, or they've got germs. So, you know, there's in my mind, I love getting out and foraging and teaching people to do that, but some people are so far removed from that reality, you know, that just picking an apple off the ground would make them really scared.
Right. That's interesting. You know, we had an idea yesterday of speaking of apples, because we were up in a farm, and there were some apple trees there. And we thought, geez, we could do an apple cider vinegar with pine needles in it, because the vinegar pulls out the minerals, right? So, and maybe some of the aromatic compounds. And I was like, oh, we could make our own little like pine sol, right? Because we clean our counters and stuff with apple cider vinegar. And I was thinking, geez, we put pine needles in there, we might be able to create a really cool cleaning product just at home. And that's the way we want to think about stuff. That's newer stuff. It's like, how do we use what we already have? And for example, in the UK, there's so many abandoned apple trees, abandoned apple orchards. It's incredible. You can make your own cider, your own apple cider vinegar. You could get turned into applesauce. You can just eat them as apples. You can juice them. And it just goes on and on, especially with Nettles. Fresh apple juice with Nettles in the UK. That I miss, I have to say, from my years of living over there. That little combination.
Just coming up now, and I've been foraging them and getting them and sticking them in smoothies and giving them to the kids. And, you know, they won't have Nettles. My oldest, I've got a 17-year-old, and he wraps them up and can just eat them. But I'm not that brave.
It's really interesting. If you grab them if you come underneath the nettle and you squeeze it like that and you pull, usually they don't get you. And once it gets in your mouth, the stinger will deactivate very, very quickly in your mouth. And so as long as you can get the whole thing into your mouth, you can eat them just as they are right off the stalk. The power of nettles, I would say, is tantamount. It's one of the most powerful foods in the world. Rudolf Steiner called it the jack of all trades. It does every job. It's probably the most important message, right? Of like, when you go in, you disturb an ecosystem and you take the forest away, what comes in? Nettles come in. And so that's your food, but you have to work at it. And there's no way to really get rid of those nettles either, which is really nice. Like nature goes, I'm here now, and I'm going to hold here until this land is restored back to forest.
So what's your favorite way to work with nettles?
I like nettle tea a lot. I also like nettle root tincture.
Sorry.
Look, nettle root is really good. I like nettle root tincture. That's really good for men. That's a male pattern baldness. If I had to say one thing for male pattern baldness, nettle root tincture is the best. And so what that's doing, what we believe the strategy there is that the follicle becomes sensitive to dihydrotestosterone, and the nettle compounds block that sensitivity, and so the follicle revives. That's kind of how it works. So it's not topical, it's an
Okay.
internal. You could do things topically, but that's an internal thing that you could do for male pattern baldness. So it's cool. And nettles are like that. It's like it's addressing the most important issues. Like, for example, nettles for blood. There's hardly anything that's a better blood builder in the world than nettles. Nettles is an antihistamine, right? So nettles are excellent for histamine reactions, allergic reactions, autoimmune problems. Like we have major problems like that today. Also, I eat a lot of nettle seeds, or the little flower things. So we go through, and I basically have my scissors. Let me show you my scissors. I got my scissors. And so I go through, and so usually with one hand I'll have a glove because I really want to get in there, and I'll just go snip, 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 and then I'll have a bowl underneath, and I'll get all the little flowers and all the little seed things, and then I'll put those into a pan, and then we'll cook those up. And that's kind of like, we cook those up kind of like quinoa.
Okay.
It's a lot like quinoa. Yep.
Because they're
And
very good for the adrenals, aren't they? They help to feed the adrenals and reduce the cortisol in the body.
yeah, just you get that feeling of just, it's an anti-inflammatory feeling, and it's really nice. And everything, I could just go on about nettles, everything about them. And they're also a very good boundary plant. So if you're into keeping the deer out or keeping the animals out, it's like, hey, put nettles all along your borders, and the animals have a tough time getting through it. And wherever they do get through, you just keep putting more in there right in front of their path. And pretty soon they'll be like, we're going somewhere else.
I've got my lettuces and onions and garlic I planted out the other day, and a cat's got in there and dug some of them up. So maybe I need to plant some nettles around them.
That's it. We had to hunt in this neighborhood. We didn't know that nettle was in this neighborhood here in Texas, in the Houston area, but one of my crew found them. So we've got a nettles that he dug up down the road in a pot. We'll let those kind of fill out, and then those will go on the ground and spread out. And then from there, you can take sections and move them, and eventually you build a whole nettle empire, so to
Amazing.
speak.
So, would you think, because one of the things that I really love looking at and working with is the energetics of the plants as well. It's like, we can work with them on a physical level, but they also are these beautiful energetic beings. So, we can work with them spiritually and physically. So, you were saying about putting them around to kind of protect your space. So, energetically, they're probably also holding that space, aren't they, as well?
Yes, like mugwort. You mentioned mugwort earlier. Mugwort is very well known all over the world, everywhere that it shows up, from Nepal to North America to the UK to Africa, every spot where it ever grows. Every single tribe always says it's the spirit protector. They didn't have cell phones, but they knew that, right? They know that about nettles. So nettles are not nettles, mugwort. So mugwort's a great boundary plant as well, and mugwort and nettles grow great together. And I've grown them together for years. So that's a really good combination, those two. And what I love about mugwort is when you finally want to get it out, and I'm talking about Artemisia vulgaris, there's other really cool mugworts like Douglasana, which is the California mugwort, another favorite, but it doesn't quite have this property. A little bit does, but when you really are like, let's say you have a orchard and you're like, okay, half that has to be fallow because I don't have enough trees, or I haven't got to there yet, or that kind of thing. That's where the mugwort goes in. So I put the mugwort in all those spots where the fruit trees are going to grow. When it's time to put the fruit trees in, you literally get a shovel under the mugwort, take the whole root ball out, shake the whole thing off, and all the dirt comes out perfectly matriculated. It's like a perfect size, granulated is what I'm looking for. That it's perfectly granulated and the soil's perfectly opened up. It's like the most amazing space holder for fruit trees, or if you maybe you want to put berry bushes in or whatever. And so that's what I like about mugwort. If it starts to spread around your property, good. Take it and move it to where you want to plant trees at some point in the future, and it will open up the soil for you and prepare the hole. It's amazing. It's a discovery.
That's incredible. I didn't know that. I've got loads of mugwort growing because I love having, I've got a tea here which is mugwort, nettle, blue lotus, butterfly pea, goji berries, astragalus, and shilajit.
Well done. That sounds good. I want some of that.
I wish.
Shilajit, let's talk about that. That's in the new world, right? The new earth. One of the most amazing things is Shilajit. Now, Pure Black is my favorite brand. I know this guy. I trust this brand because I've been through the Shilajits of the world. And there's a lot of bad brands out there. There's a lot of cheating and all kinds of problems with Shilajits out there. They cut with stuff you don't want in your body, that kind of stuff. So eventually I backed this particular brand. People can do their own research, but the reason why I think Shilajit is so powerful is because in this container right here, that amount of Shilajit is going to last me
Years,
months, maybe years.
maybe about a year or so. It's
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, so this is the reason. Now the Pure Black guy disagrees with me. I'm like, the reason why this became so important for the yogis is because look how much food I've got in this little space.
Yeah.
Can you tell me anything else like this? I don't know anything else that's just jam packed. And so this is survival stuff. And that's why I'm a big Shilajit guy. It's like for right now, I think it's a really important idea to have some food that's not dependent on the system and that's easy to carry and that's very dense. And so Shilajit really, because it does have calories in it, really, it's not really a super herb. It's more of a super food. It is really a food.
Because obviously it's got like approximately 82 trace minerals, and for those of you who don't know, it's thousands of years old decayed plant matter that's collected from usually around the Himalayas, and it's really good for the for everything, really, isn't it, in the body?
It's a tonic, and it's black in color, obviously, so that means it's a longevity tonic. It's a Jing tonic, so it's kidney, adrenal, and it's very water soluble, so it's really easy to get into a tea, for example. It's really easy to use, which is so great about it. And another thing I would say about it is it's got that fulvic and humic acid side to it, and let me see if I got this right, alpha benzopyrones, I think I got that right, which is like kind of a super fulvic acid. So you've got all of those interesting compounds which drive nutrients into cells and help detoxify cells, and to me are like the ultimate carriers, right, in the body, like of transporters would probably be a better word.
Yeah, but you shouldn't give Shilajit to children, should you?
No, kids can have Shilajit. It's just, yeah, sure. I mean, once the child has developed a liver, which really is by the age of 2, then they can have Shilajit, and they can have also bitter herbs at that point. Before that time, the child doesn't really have a developed liver, so you don't want to give them real strange tasting things like Shilajit or real bitter substances, right? They're more on the mother's milk still. I think personally, you're supposed to have your mother's milk until you're 2.5, and then you wean on to eating vegetation, which, is kind of giving you those same magnesium, calcium hits that you get from mother's milk.
Because what I thought was it works on the hormonal system, so maybe it's just small amounts and not too much of it, but then you can't take too much of it because it's quite energizing, isn't it?
It's quite energizing. It's really, to me, it's one of the great things of our world, right? It's like Shilajit. What did the Vedic civilization give us? They gave us Shilajit, they gave us ghee, they gave us Tulsi, they gave us ashwagandha. These are great gifts to humankind, and do you need more than that list right there? I mean, you could survive on that list right there. You add a few things in on top of that, and you're in a zone, you're in a knowledge base where you're starting to go, oh wait, I can make it. And that's important right now, because people are concerned about the supply chain breaking down, what's going to happen with our food. But if you're outside of that and you're like, oh, I get my food from Mother Nature, I got 10 bottles of Shilajit, I got this, I got that, you're good. We grow a lot of Tulsi in the front yard here, so we have plenty of that wonderful holy basil. It's just, we got ashwagandha growing in the backyard. We got plenty of that going, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And holy basil is so good for it's antiviral, it's antibacterial, so you've got a lot of incredible properties. And what I love about it is that if you're in India, we spent 3 years in India, every house has a big holy basil plant, in the entranceway, as a kind of blessing to Krishna, and a protection of the space spiritually, which I think is so beautiful. And I think that reverence for that plant shows you how much, how amazing it is.
It's one of the top ones. The way we'd actually categorize it is as an adaptogen. It's like premier adaptogen in the world, maybe number one. It's arguably number one in the world,
Wow.
right? So that tells us, like, okay, I should grow that one. Because if you're confused, right, there's so many things. What am I going to do? This or that, or he said mugwort, then nettles, and then what? Then ashwagandha. What am I going to do? So you don't need everything, but if you have a few things, and tulsi being one of them, because it seeds easily, it's easy to collect the seeds. It's incredibly nutritious. It tastes good. It's a breath freshener. It's an adaptogen. It's wonderful as tea. It makes an incredible pesto. It just goes on and on. That's the kind of thing we want. And, if we're really looking at this, we're going, okay, wait, okay, what else do I need? Now, one of the things that I really recommend is a stable fat or oil that will keep. Ghee is one of those, but another one's olive oil. And so in the new future that we're heading into, olive oil is going to come back and take its rightful place, not only as a nutritive substance, but it's very rich in oleuropein. Oleuropein being a very powerful breast cancer neutralizer. It's one of the top. I mean, I personally think it's oleuropein in the entire olive tree, concentrated in olives and in olive oil, that makes the Mediterranean diet all work. It's an iridoid. It's an unusual yellow green compound that is unique in all of nature, that is, again, present in olive leaves. It's present in olive bark. It's in the roots, and it's in the fruits, and it's, of course, in the oil. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of bring that one in, because if you want to store something, that's a good one to have. Make sure you've got some olive oil in your possession, and I'd get a box, like a case of 12 or 24, and then boom, have those ready. Because if you have that, and you have these superfoods, and you have Shilajit, and you've got your local wild stuff, you are so easily surviving. You're thriving.
I haven't got a stock of olive oil, so I'm going to get that. That's a really good idea. I love olive oil, and I know that when you put olive oil on salads and raw foods, it helps it to break down and digest better, and it helps you to absorb those nutrients, doesn't it?
It does. And so there's been very good research on that with carotenoids, which are a whole family, about 750 color pigments, of which the most famous is beta carotene, but lutein, another very important one. And there's many other ones. Lycopene's very famous as well. Astaxanthin's another famous one on that list. When you have oil present in your diet, like let's say, in every green leafy vegetable like kale, you're going to have always 4 carotenoids that backs the chlorophyll.
Mhm.
And so if you have a high chlorophyll plant like kale, or even something crazy like spirulina or chlorella, you always have very high carotenoids. And whenever you have an oil present with that, as you're digesting it, say olive oil in particular, you radically increase the absorption of the carotenoids into your blood, which then can actually, in certain cases, like with lycopene, can actually change from being just a pigment and just being a nutrient and antioxidant, and actually become immunological. It can actually influence and improve the immune system. This is also true, I would suspect, with anthocyanins, which is a whole nother class of pigments, which is more fruit pigments. The carotenoids are more like carrot pigments or vegetable pigments. The fruit pigments, or the phenols or the bioflavonoids, those kinds of things, they're also more absorbable with oil in your diet, dramatically more so. And you can improve, for example, if you eat blueberries. I like blueberries with olive oil. And the reason why I got into it is because of this research.
Yeah.
You eat those two together, you get much better uptake of the anthocyanins, which improves your eyesight. And then I would suspect if you keep going, you're going to almost get an immunological effect, because these compounds, like the anthocyanins, blue and purple compounds in particular from berries, have very powerful immunological effects. They're nervous system effects, in the eye being an extrusion of our nervous system. So it's not just your eyes, it's also your brain, and also your gut. Your gut nervous system is influenced, but the oil is the catalyst that makes it happen. So, if things broke down, we'd run, we might be able to get some avocados, maybe we might be able to get some nuts and seeds, but to have an actual oil becomes much more difficult.
It's interesting you said that. My brain started ticking because I love making products. One of the things I call myself is a superfood alchemist, because it's that combination of putting things together. Um, and so I was thinking about elderberries. We have a lot of elderberries in the UK, which are very high in anthocyanins, and very good for the antiviral properties within it. So I was suddenly thinking you could make some really nice olive oils, infused olive oils with the elderberries in there, to extract that, because I never think about that. Usually I put them in alcohol or I put them in apple cider vinegar to extract the medicine from the elderberry, but I'm going to add some oil in next time to do that because that's
It's
exciting.
I think you'll see quickly the look of that, what you're talking about, is really an amazing thing. It's caviar. When you get a real significant amount of elderberries, and especially the elderberries that we grow are it's geez, what's the genus? But it's the Canadensis. So it's the what's the elderberry genus? It's
Sambuca. It's the sambuca.
Sambuca, Sambuca canadensis. They're small. Okay, so when you get them on and you get a big bowl of them and you put olive oil in there and you mix it up, it looks like caviar.
Yeah, but you can't eat. Well, I believe you can't eat them raw because they can give you an upset stomach.
Elderberry?
Yeah.
Oh, you can eat them raw. The main thing about elderberry is, yeah, there is a toxin in the elderberry stems and to some degree in the seeds.
Okay.
That's why I don't recommend actually blending elderberry seeds or elderberries. You don't blend them, but you can eat them because if you eat them, almost all those seeds go through you, so you'll have no problem. So
Well, that's
we do
amazing.
large processing of elderberry at my house because we have some pretty advanced elderberry bushes. They've been there for almost 20 years. So we do get a large amount of them. And by the way, the pileated woodpecker of our ecosystem, which is the one with the big head and really funky, bizarre flight patterns, comes for those. And I find that interesting. It'll come for those. It won't come for any other fruit, but it comes for those.
Wow.
And that tells me something. And it comes at a certain time of the year. And when it comes, it's such a cool thing to see it. And it's so magical, that creature.
That's incredible because I really thought that you couldn't eat them because I thought the seed inside it would give you an upset stomach. It's funny, isn't it, how these programmings get put out and things that we get told. And I knew that the leaves and the stems were toxic, but you can use the leaves for a muscle rub. They're incredibly antispasmodic if you just apply them externally.
Oh, nice. I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah, so you can put those in olive oil and then make a nice rub for the muscles, and that's great. But elders, I think elders are one of my favorite trees because you get the beautiful flowers and can make such lovely infused water, and that's really good as well for hay fever. The elderflowers, when you combine elderflower, nettle, and plantain, the three of those in a tea drank throughout the day can get rid of hay fever.
That sounds really good. I just was liking hearing that. And see, these are all like little wild food hacks, right? It's just so easy. Now, right now is the time. So what we're doing right now is we're stockpiling on seeds and we're making sure that what we don't have in the ground, at least we have is in seed form so we can get it going down the road. Now, fortunately, we get enough moisture down here because we're still in the Gulf ecosystem in this part of Texas. So when people think of Texas, they think of these dry, barren deserts. That's West Texas. This is East Texas. So we're still in that. So we can grow almost anything here. And if you got, well, all you have to do is just add water. So even if the water broke down, we'd still be able to get some things growing over here. And that, you just want to think about all scenarios, right? So we're thinking about all different types of scenarios and just making sure we're prepared. Now, this particular batch, this is so Texas. I wish I had it downstairs, but this woman, she sells her seeds in ammo boxes, ammunition boxes, and she sells enough seeds to say, let's say you get $200 of seeds. So I've got one of her ammunition boxes.
Yep.
That's enough to grow 4,300 pounds of vegetables in 1 year.
Wow. That's a lot of
It's a
seeds.
lot. And then she shows you her prime student who's an 8-year-old who did it.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That's amazing. I think that's one thing I've been doing is stocking up on seeds. It's like, if we've got seeds and also if we've got herbs in the ground, if we've got stuff that comes back every year,
Yes.
like the mallow, it's like Ditanda. I don't know. Do you know Ditanda?
I don't know Ditanda. When you said that, I was like, Ditanda? I don't know that plant.
Oh, you've got to find out if you can get it. It's also known as peppergrass, and
Okay.
it tastes like wasabi. It's amazing.
Is it a grass?
It's like a no, it's like a leaf.
Okay.
And it just grows. It's rhizomal, so it just pops up everywhere. So once you've got it, it spreads like wildfire, and it keeps coming back. And it is incredible, that really wasabi taste. So you can put it in salads. You can, So what I've been saying to people is like the more plants we can get, the more herbs that just come back that you don't have to do anything with. They're just there. Then the better it's going to be, because then we can have the seeds for the things that don't do that, like the courgettes or the squashes or the pumpkins, all that kind of jazz.
Here's the ammo box. She got that
Amazing.
handed to me. So that's Liberty Seed Banks. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Texas ready. Anyway, so this is really cool because ammo boxes, for those of you who know, have a seal. And so that means the moisture can't get in. So there's a little rubber seal on the inside here
Okay.
that keeps everything out. And then boom, look at it. It's just so, I mean,
Wow.
stocked full.
That is incredible. I want one of those over here.
Right? You can call them up. I mean, I'm sure it's mostly the same stuff that she has in here that's going to grow there. And she did that on purpose because they don't sell just in Texas.
Okay.
They sell everywhere. And so what a cool, isn't this amazing? Look at this. Let me give you a list here. Peppers, carrots, squash, corn, lettuce, cabbage, beets, watermelon, mustard, cantaloupe, onions, eggplant, beans, Brussels sprouts. It's actually Brussels sprout. Everyone says that wrong. Pumpkins, broccoli, tomatoes, chard, spinach, asparagus, cauliflower, celery, peas, turnips, radishes, cucumbers, and zucchini.
Amazing.
So that's a fun one. Another one thing I would want to say about this, in terms of the different plants, we've been experimenting here. We're growing a lot of peppers. Peppers do well in this environment, but something else that we stumbled into that really is doing well, and I'm really excited about, is gynostemma. Gynostemma, and I'm sure you're familiar with that plant from Chinese medicine, grows very well in the UK. It can really grow in almost all temperate climates. So it can survive a cold winter, even a freezing winter.
Wow, I didn't know that it could grow over here. That's amazing because I use that a lot. It's incredible. It's such a good adaptogen. It's really good to give you energy. It's such a nice thing. But I didn't think it could grow here, so I'm gonna have to look up getting some gynostemma plants, because that's the thing, isn't it? The more stuff we can get and we can grow, whether we're growing it or friends or family are, then we can all just trade, and we've got these medicines to hand, regardless of where they are in the world.
Right, exactly. And so that's a piece of it, is the food sovereignty. The new earth is about it's really cool because it's driving us back to farming, and that farming is like running your own laboratory. There's so much knowledge, and it's so many incredible things that occur as you're developing your farm. You're starting to go, whoa, what's going on here? For example, one of my big discoveries, and one of the things that I have shipped here every year, and hopefully we'll have even more shipped this year, is giant big totes of charcoal. Now, we burn a lot of fires in this land. We're on 5 acres here, so we do burn a lot of fires and things like that here. So we do get a lot of charcoal that way, and we get a lot of ash. But to have like rice-size cut bits of charcoal that's prepared for you, delivered in totes, with that single amendment, I can do anything. I mean, I can create soils out of nothing. It's just incredible what that does, because it's a vermiculite. So it creates space. It holds moisture. It's a black substance. So it's like a jing. It's like a resetter of the ecosystem. It neutralizes any toxins in the environment and in the ecosystem. So if you spread charcoal around your land, any toxins coming down get sucked up by the charcoal. It sucks up odors. So all around our septic system, we've got charcoal, so that we have no odor coming out of our septic system. You can put the charcoal, exactly what we have here, in the toilets, flush it down, it goes into your system and neutralizes all odor inside the system.
Wow, that's incredible.
It
So
goes
I
on.
keep charcoal internally, but I've never thought about putting it onto the soil. Like that never even crossed my mind. That's incredible. Wow.
It's such a breakthrough. It's called biochar is typically how it's described, because we said charcoal, people go, what? But biochar seems to be the more appropriate languaging in farming. And one of the beautiful things about it is you start to realize, you start to go, geez, like, what purifies our water? Charcoal filters. What purifies our air? Charcoal filters. What purifies the earth? Charcoal. What purifies us? Charcoal. And it just goes on and on. So you know my spiel on this is that in terms of survival, one of the most important things you can have, charcoal. You should have charcoal that you can ingest. I always have mine. It's over there. I can't quite reach to it, but I have a big container of charcoal always in capsules, in the Puluan capsules, which unfortunately we're not going to be able to get those capsules anymore due to supply chain problems. We're just going to go back to vegetarian capsules, but I mean, that's such a special thing to have, a charcoal product encapsulated in that kind of tapioca. For so many reasons. I could go on. I brush my teeth with charcoal. You can use charcoal as a skin mask. You can everything. I mean, it just goes on. If you get stung, like for example, I got stung on the toe by fire ants. We have fire ants here, and if you just put your finger into water and then dip it in the charcoal and then put it on the bite, it's pretty much gone within a minute.
Wow, do you think that works for mosquito bites as well?
It absolutely works for mosquito bites or any bite. Even, I got stung in the eye I was on my way. This is a few years ago, about 3 years ago, and I was on my way out the door, and I had to run into the shed to get something like a tool or something before I left. And I run into the shed, and a wasp just
Oh,
literally it dove on me and hit me in the eyeball with its stinger. I got stung in the eyeball. I've never heard anything like that
oh,
happen. It was the craziest thing ever. I
oh.
immediately ran inside and I put now I have charcoal in capsules, and I also have an open charcoal thing for reasons like this. I pull the glass lid off. I put my finger in water, then put it in there. So my finger's covered in charcoal, and I put it right into my eye. And I was within 1 minute, I was better. Within 5 minutes, I was okay. Within 20 minutes, I drove out of there.
That's incredible.
That's how powerful it is. And so that these are the things that, see, this is why this is going on, right? We have to like go back to nature, but we're much improved. Like we have so much knowledge we can cross reference. It's incredible
And,
today.
and it's a longevity thing, isn't it, charcoal? They did a study with mice where they found it increased their lifespan by, I think it was 3 times.
Yeah, there isn't any. This is something I eventually stumbled into, and thank God for the C60. The C60 molecule is kind of like always. There's always some C60 in charcoal. It's one of the more unique molecules in charcoal. But at any rate, eventually, from the research on longevity in C60, I started going, maybe there's something to longevity in charcoal. And if you do that research, you'll find out that charcoal is number one in longevity of anything you can ingest, period. And for your dogs and cats and any animals and anything, charcoal is the best thing for them because it's the most antitoxic substance in the world and the simplest to understand and simplest to consume. So if you've got like a parrot and you're like, I want this parrot to live 100 years, put a little charcoal in their water. Cats, dogs, every animal, gerbils, rats, anything, they love charcoal. Charcoal is incredibly important, and for humans, of course, it's the most important because we live in a toxic world. If there's one thing we can say about our world and the old Earth, that old thing, that was toxic. And so, how do we remediate that and detoxify ourselves? Charcoal.
That's incredible. And what you said about the soil, I think, is so important as well because we are in a soil crisis that is going to become quite epic in proportion because we're not going to be able to grow, or some people won't be able to grow on the scale that growing is happening because we have messed up the soil to such huge extents. Sadhguru has been saying, there's going to be civil wars coming because of the soil, because of the state of it. And one of the things that I really feel is that the soil and our guts are so intrinsically linked, and the quality of the soil is the same as the quality of our gut. So if we don't have this biodiversity in the soil, then we're not going to have it in our guts, which means our immune system will be lowered, and all of these things. So if we can start to mop up some of the poison they've been putting in the earth by putting charcoal down, that's, to me, that is the most incredible thing you said. That's just really, sometimes one thing someone says just goes boing. That's done it for me. That's just blown my mind because I never made that association with cleaning the soil like that.
Just imagine you move into a new place and they've been spraying glyphosate. Throw charcoal everywhere. Just drop it on everything. We like the combination of getting charcoal down year after year, and then on top of that, also rock dusts and shungite powders and all kinds of interesting things. But charcoal, if you want to go straight science, charcoal is an adsorbent substance that sucks up 100 to 200 times its weight in toxins. And by the way, it knows what the toxins are. That's a whole nother really amazing discovery about charcoal, is how does it know? How could it know that, for example, glyphosate is a toxin, but that calcium is a nutrient that you need? And it's because it's an electrochemical phenomenon, the way it works, not an absorption phenomenon. Like we think it's like a sponge. It isn't. It's more like a magnet. And so charcoal sucks to itself like a magnet toxins in the environment and holds them. So it's a legitimate binder. And people say, okay, I'm doing the cleanse now or something, and I'm doing the charcoal, but I know I got to get this charcoal out through me because I don't want it to reabsorb. It will never. There's no chance charcoal's ever reabsorbing. There's not going to be any toxins that charcoal sucked up. It's going to be reabsorbed in your body. It's a legitimate binder to all toxins. And so that's just telling us, it's teaching us about like, wow, what do we do to save our world? It's actually pretty easy if we just use it's really Stone Age technology. It always has been.
Yeah. No, that's so. Would you, if you put, so let's say if you had a fire in your house and you put the ash out, that's obviously got some charcoal element to it as well, doesn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to be careful. When everything's completely calcined and it turns like into a white powder,
Yeah.
that's going to be a like a caustic ash, right? So it's going to be like a little bit too alkaline, and it can change the direction of your soil. However, let's say you have a compost pile and you're trying to balance it out. Well, that ash is great into a compost pile because composts are very acidic, and that alkaline ash is perfect to balance it out. So that's typically what humans have done since the beginning of time. Is we would just take our food scraps and that kind of waste, and then we'd pile on just what was cut in the yard, and then pile on top of that wood ash, and then pile on top of that more food scraps, and that makes a really good soil and a very well balanced soil.
So if you were making your own compost, we make our own compost here, and we eat, I would say, 99% organic food. So I'm not too worried about that. But a lot of people making compost probably aren't eating huge amounts of organic food. So if you put the charcoal in, that would be really good because that would be absorbing those excess pesticides.
That's right. It remediates you, it remediates the environment, and it remediates the sewage systems too. I mean, I could go on. It's just like as you get deeper into it, for example, like it's in all the toilets here. It's gone into the septic system here. It's going back into the earth that way. My farm in Ontario, Canada, it's we've been putting charcoal in the toilets for years now, so there's no odors that come up through the toilets anymore. That's all gone because it's old. I mean, that house was built in 1960, so you can imagine the toilet's been there since 1960. After a while, those odors come back up. Not anymore. You have, let's say, mice poop or something. After a while, and you clean it up, the mice pee smell's still there. Put charcoal in all the corners. That's gone too. And it just goes on and on because cleanliness is near to godliness. And in the new earth, it's going to be a clean earth. We will have learned our lesson. And this is one of those tools that teaches us an incredible lesson. Now, I will say this too, is if you want to make your own charcoal, you're always going to find that outside of those calcined middles of the fire where it got hottest, there's going to be your charcoal. But basically, you're getting the right balances of gases and heat and everything to charcoal it at that distance. But you could also take a metal thing like this, and we could fill that with wood, dense wood, or usually you want to use like shells, things that are real hard. Throw this whole thing, let's say this wasn't, didn't have a seal in it, was old. I could literally use this though, because it's not going to melt. And I could throw this in the middle of the fire, and there's enough space where the gases can get out. So I'm baking the wood, I'm baking the shells. That's what creates charcoal.
And I heard you saying on something, I think it was maybe on the inner circle, you were talking about you can do that with mushrooms.
Yes, because that's another dense material. So ancient people were onto this. You could use something like that. That one's it's most dense right there at the base, right at the
Yeah.
neck, what we call the neck, right there. But I've made charcoal out of that birch polypore, the one you have in your hand. I have made charcoal out of it. It was really good too. And so you can take dense mushrooms like that one, but there's even more dense, and you can charcoal them rather than using, say, coconut shells or walnut shells or birch bark, or you could also use willow wood. But the mushroom makes a really, really good charcoal, really
And
interesting one.
would you still be getting the medicinal properties of the mushrooms with the charcoal, or would they be burned away? Because
They're burned away supposedly, but see, the structure is different, right? So we're always looking for these weird structures. Like C60 is a structure of part of the charcoal. The whole body of man, massive charcoal, is not going to just be in layers. If we look at charcoal close, we can see it's flat and in layers. But when it's curved and when it has a roundness to it at the molecular level, then you're going to find the fullerenes like C60, and you'll have more of those, I suspect, in, say, a mushroom charcoal than you would have in a wood charcoal.
and with the C60, what's the best way to have it? Is it in its powder form, or does it need to be in oil for it to be absorbed better?
Well, it's oil soluble. That's the nature of the molecule. So that's why people got the idea of let's put it into oil and then we'll deliver it that way. It is not, it's very hydrophobic. It's very difficult to get into water. That's a whole story. I mean, I spent years dealing with scientists on fullerenol, which is a water soluble C60, which I do believe we have a really good one now. I don't think I've got any made right now. I need to make some. But I don't think fullerenol is the right product for the people, because it's very small amount of material. It needs to be mixed up and shaken up properly. And the type of product you want for C60 is going to have an oil already in it, like an olive oil or a sunflower oil or something like that. And then it delivers pretty much instantly once it hits your system. Whereas the fullerenols, that's very tricky. And that's a long scientific story behind that one.
We've only got a few more minutes left. I can't believe how quickly this time has gone. I love having you on my show, and I know I always hear such brilliant feedback from people who listen to the show. So it's really amazing. what I would love to do is just to have a little quick summary, because we've got like 4 minutes left. So just to kind of summarize the top things that you think we really need to bring in for this new earth that is here now. I think that's a really important thing to say as well. It's like we are in this new earth, it's here, but we're birthing it through us in this moment. Because I think if we always project stuff forward, it's coming, then it never does. So
It never does. I agree with that. It's happening now. Now, what's available right now today is wild food, and you need to understand the logic of your ecosystem. And that means you need to get in your ecosystem and see what's really going on. We arrived in the Texas ecosystem last year, and we started seeing, my God, the amount of pine pollen here is unbelievable. So this year we were geared up to get out there and get the pine pollen, and that's a big thing. Getting the saw palmetto berries is another wild food that's out here. So wild food was a piece of what we talked about. Another piece is just having enough seeds and having enough things to grow so that you're sustainable. You don't need much. You don't need much land. It's incredible. This young girl, again, I think she was 8 years old, grew 4,300 pounds of vegetables in, looked to me like it was 6 to 8 raised bed gardens that her father had built for her. So that's not much space. I mean, it was easily in the space of this office. If we, took all these books and stuff out of here, it was easily in here. Another one that we talked about is charcoal and the charcoal revolution and all the different uses for charcoal, from internal use and for your own longevity and health, all the way on to the health of the earth and health of the air and water. Another thing that we got into that's really key is that there's forces that make their way into our foods, that domestication and fence lines block, right? So those forces don't really develop. That's why wild food's better. Or just get the plants yourself, like the blueberries, for example, or berries, get them in and just let them do their thing. And they come in and we can develop those forces. We can feed those forces. The adaptogens was a subject that came up momentarily, and I think that's a really important lesson, is to always have some adaptogens in your diet. Tulsi being one of the preeminent adaptogens. Shilajit, black foods, black substances. Charcoal also is black, of course, and just how much density you can get of that. We talked about olive oil and some of the oil soluble compounds in nature, including the carotenoids and the anthocyanins, and then we mentioned C60 also being oil soluble. That's also interesting. And by the way, some of my friends do charcoal and then oil, charcoal and oil, to get more of the oil soluble charcoal element activating in their digestive tract, and that's an interesting thing to check out as well. What else do we hit on top of that? I guess we're coming into a new earth, and when you're in the new earth, you want to use the tools that are around you. So I was talking about my little grounding things, and just simple tools that are already around us right now. Activate them, and that's stacking your reality so that you're doing more. It's more intention in every moment. Ultimately, from all the success principles, we're doing all the big rehash on that right now. The Jim Rohns, the Wayne Dyers, the Zig Ziglars of the world. From all of that, the takeaway that I got at the core of it all is you're going to stack in more intention into every moment. That's the ultimate goal of all.
Love it. There's two things. We literally have 1 minute, but there's two things I want to really talk about. This is something that I've been shipping over for people on my website and my membership, and it's your coated silver, and I love this.
There's nothing like it. Against chapped lips, it's absolutely miraculous. Again, almost any topical thing, it's absolutely insane. I mean, one applicator, you get a crack in your heel, put one drop of that, rub it into the crack, it's gone next day. I mean, crazy level. You have a problem in your mouth. Like a friend of mine had a very bad problem with his tooth. I put 3 drops in his mouth on a ski trip. He forgot about his problem. Wow. It's like that. I mean, it's just incredible. So the coated silver is it's a breakthrough. And as a friend of ours, actually, Dan Goya up in Clarkson University in upstate New York, who discovered it, and he discovered it over 10 years ago, and then eventually he created this product for the health food market because he was using it in industry. They'd figured out how to particleize and completely surround every single silver ion with a gelatinous matrix, and in our case we use an aloe vera style matrix. So for any topical thing, you can drink it. It's just incredible. It's very important for nervous system, and so when somebody has very long history of nervous system problems, I'm always getting them on the coated silver. Very valuable.
It is incredible. I mean, I've got about 4 bottles. There's kind of one in all the main rooms.
Me too. That's because everyone's always like, I need coated silver. Where's the bottle? And so I was always, I got one here. There's always one that little spot. And that's how you want to have it, by the way. That's another survival thing that, one bottle has 83 drops in it. So it's going to go, you've never had anything like it's so sad. I mean, I just want to quickly say the colloidal silver that's sold on the market, It's nowhere near strong enough. It's not even close, and they do that on purpose. So just so everyone knows, in a little bottle like this big, you're getting.
A
I
lot.
mean, it's in one drop out of that bottle is more than you're getting in a bottle like this out of a health food store easily.
Incredible. We're out of time. Thank you so, so much for your time, your energy, your input, all the stuff you do for the world. You are so instrumental, I think, in spreading the change and in waking people up to how we can empower our health and our well-being. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all you've done for me and for the world. I think, I really think you're a wonderful person.
Thank you for those beautiful words. And I agree that you are a beautiful person as well. And for the great work you're doing, thank you so much. To everybody out there, now is the time for action. As we like to say, now is the best time ever.
So all the links so you can contact David Avocado Wolfe will be in the description. So please do check out his website, check out his inner circle. It's incredible. And all the incredible memes and that stuff he's doing. You're doing some great work. So thank you, everyone. This has been Juliette Bryant on Kindasound Radio. Lots of love.